don't know. Well, I can actually email you one, but yeah, and you just print it and put your name on it. But sometimes I have some, but I'm just not sure if I. September was Suicide Prevention Month, and we passed out so much stuff. Yeah, that's one thing that I didn't think to refill.
You can bring out
Yeah.
you gonna sign them? You sign. I mean, somebody gotta sign them. They can't be blank.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started
Okay.
because I know you guys are ready to get back to the house after maybe a long, busy day.
Well, we're excited to be here. And get
Thank you.
started.
Can I grab an extra mic for anybody who may ask?
What was her name?
Amanda.
Amanda was here. She
Uh,
talked to us
no.
about-
I mean, Cook.
Belinda.
Belinda.
Hello.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Oh, why I said
Belinda.
Amanda?
Hello.
I'm sorry.
And that was
Hey.
so-
Hey,
That's the
Good.
reason why.
Hey.
That's the reason why our bishop was saying that he wanted to have
Oh,
this
good,
training
good,
because
good.
of that information that came forth when we did that presentation together.
Well, that's what Corey attended one of our meetings. He said he wanted to be on our team, and I said, good.
I have a microphone here if y'all got any questions.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it here just in case.
Oh, give her the microphone.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone. 6:15. I'm like this. You can turn them lights down. They're so bright.
Yeah.
Hey, Elder Glover, when you get time, these lights, can you help me out with lowering them some? Because woo, I can see, but it's kind of, yeah. That's a lot better right
Yeah.
there. It's a lot better right there. We'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to say thank you guys for being here this evening. My name is Corey Bowl. I am the mental health director of our Ministry of Life Changing Christian Center. Oh my goodness. This evening I wanted to have the presentation given by myself as well as Miss Cheryl Dotson. She's with A-Spark. I am part of the A-Spark group, and so I was able to be blessed to be a part of the team, so I can be able to continue to provide education for those who may need information about suicide and suicide prevention, because of course that is a very tough topic that we don't really hear very much about, but it's very necessary, especially in the times that we live in. And so this evening we're going to have the floor open if you guys have any questions or comments or anything by that nature in regards to the presentation. Feel free to ask. If you don't ask, hey, we don't have the information. So I encourage you guys to ask questions. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. This is Miss Cheryl Dotson once again.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes. Thank y'all so much. Yes, like Corey said, my name is Cheryl Dodson, and the reason I'm here today is 8 years ago I lost a friend to suicide, and he tried to talk to me about it. And I always tell people with this gray hair, all my life we've said, "Oh, don't talk about that. You'll encourage them," and I'll share with you what I've learned since I lost him. But after I lost him, a journalist came from New York and said, "I want to do a story on your friend," and I said, "Well, I'll tell you two things. I won't talk about his death, and I won't talk about suicide." And that story was released into a podcast. And the title wasn't very flattering. The title was S-Town, and you can imagine the four-letter word that S stood for. So when it was released, in 4 days, it had 10 million downloads. Yeah, and the first month, 40 million. I went to an event last month or so, and they said it's currently been downloaded 100 million times. So I didn't know what a podcast was. I sure didn't know anything about going viral. And so I would open up my phone and I would have I'd be at work. I worked at Hendrick Chevrolet down the road, and I'd have 78 notifications, and it would be people like, you let your friend down. They tag me in an obituary. It was really, really awful. And thankfully, Katie with Alabama Suicide Prevention and Resource Coalition got my number, and she called me and she said, can we meet for a cup of coffee and see what we could do for suicide prevention in Alabama? And she said something to me that I want to share with y'all, because I don't know your backgrounds. I don't know what you've experienced, but she said, forgive yourself. So if you have lost a loved one or a friend, I want to offer that same forgiveness, because if you don't know what to look for, if you haven't had this training, if you have had this training and someone has been thinking about suicide for a long time, it's hard to get them to turn away from it. That's why Corey and I are here today, to get you to intervene early. And the second thing is, I would want to say, I'm sorry for your loss. If you have lost someone, sometimes we act like they can't grieve because they made that choice. But we have to realize that suicide is the choice of a sick mind, just like we can have a sick body part or an ailment. Suicide is a challenge. We're going to talk to you more about that today. But when you leave here today, you will be certified in QPR, and you'll be a gatekeeper. So you'll know what to look for with someone. And it's presented. Corey and I both work with Alabama Suicide Prevention and Resource Coalition, and we're just better known as ASPARC. And it's easy to remember us because of that eternal flame logo. But Corey was just at a meeting one night, and he had attended a training, and he messaged me and said, I would like to do this. And I was thrilled, because it takes a diverse team. When Corey went with me to Montgomery to speak to Job Corps, those 70 young men, they're going to connect with him. So we want a very diverse team, and everyone's story is important and valuable in this training.
And also, let me add as well, you do not have to be a therapist to save a life. Mm-hmm. You can just be who you are as an individual, because, you never know who you interact and connect with day to day. Mm-hmm. So, you don't have to have any credentials or licensure behind your name far as, this journey that we're taking. But also I wanted to just say, I was going to say, make sure that if you guys have any questions, definitely let us know. All right. Yeah. Is this the beginning? Because
Yeah, this is it. I backed it up. Right. So yeah, right now we just ask you just to kind of think in your mind, how comfortable are you? Can you look at your best friend, your spouse, your parents, your children, and look at them and say, are you thinking about killing yourself? And the reason why we ask you to ask someone you're close to is because we find that that's more difficult. It's our worst fear to look at our child and ask them, are they thinking about suicide? Are they thinking about killing themselves? So just think about it. If that was a number 1 to 10, 1 being very uncomfortable and 10 being very comfortable, like a professional, what number would you be at right now? Because we're going to ask it again at the end of the training, and I hope that number's higher. I hope they're a lot more comfortable at the end.
And so, of course, as far as the state of Alabama just passed a law on the suicide prevention line, which is 988. So I encourage you guys, if you don't have this information or this number stored in your phone, it's very useful for those, like if you do come across someone locally, as far as it being in the grocery store, just walking along the side of the road, you have that information available to assist those that's in need. Okay. All right. So we have a couple of terms here. It might be a little class, but it's fine. We have, of course, suicide, which it indicates death caused by injury, someone with the intent to die. Okay. And then, of course, you have suicide attempts, someone who harms themselves with the intent to end their life. I mean, of course, like with myself, I come across a lot of individuals working in a hospital and reading information about, people intending to try to end their life. And it's typically because they are experiencing a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of emotions at one time that they don't know how to manage in a healthy way. So clearly what tends to happen is that individual may feel that it's normal to use taking my life as the only option that you have. But yet, we have to, help those individuals understand that it's more to just ending your life. You can actually talk to someone about, some of these thoughts and feelings that you're having. Okay, you had.
Yeah, suicidal ideation. I always like to say that's probably the most important definition we're going to talk about tonight. And the reason why is when someone's thinking about it. So imagine if one of your family members got a cancer diagnosis and you said, we found it early. You would say, well, thank God, we'll get you some help. We'll get you radiation, chemo. We'll go to the doctor. We'll take medicine. We'll eat differently. But when it comes to mental health and suicide, we say, well, I'm not really sure if they're going to end their life, so I'll wait and reach out to them later. Now, think about that. Would you tell someone with cancer, would you say, when you get to stage 4, come back and I'll help you? Absolutely not. That doesn't even sound logical, does it? So why would you tell somebody, hey, when you're on that bridge ready and contemplating jumping, then I'll help you? But I can tell you from personal experience, I did that to my own friend. I rationalized that, okay, when his dad died, he was in crisis. So I said, okay, when his mom passes away, I'm going to have to reach back out to him. But I always tell people, don't put what would make you suicidal into the what would make them suicidal, because guess what? My friend ended his life 7 years ago and his mother's still alive. So think about that too. What if we're talking about 12-year-olds and 10-year-olds? What makes me suicidal at 51 is completely different from a 10-year-old. So think about it. And when you want to help somebody, you might be scared that they're thinking about it, but that's the perfect time. That's when we're most likely, because think about it. Do you want to help a 10-year-old, or do you want to wait till he's 24 and been thinking about it 14 years? So think about it. Let's talk early. Let's talk often.
Okay. And then also you have survivors. Someone who lost a loved one to suicide is referred to as a survivor of that loss. Okay. All right. So you got the incidence of suicide.
Yeah. So how often is it happening? Why are we here today? World Health Organization estimates we lose 700,000 people each year. 500,000 of those people are males. So just by being male, you can be at a greater risk. Because why? We don't give them emotions, do we? We don't give them, we raise them to where that they can't admit when they're struggling. It was 45,000 Americans, which was actually a 3% decline. People ask how COVID and COVID-related deaths impact us, but still, think about 130 suicides today. And actually, these numbers are lagging behind. I think it's now 135, unfortunately. So imagine if we got on our news and on our phones and we found out that a plane had went down in America on Tuesday. And what if it went down on Wednesday and then Thursday? Well, what happens is we're losing an airplane of people every day to suicide, but because one's in Michigan, one's in Florida, one's in Alabama, we don't see that combined loss. So I'm not sharing that with you to discourage you. I'm sharing that with you when you leave here today, that you'll use this training, because you'll have a new set of eyes and ears and say, hey, this is happening more often than we think about it. So yeah, this is one where we like to hear from y'all. If you were looking at the slide, the far left side, Alabama was below the national average. And then we went even, and then we went above. And when went above mid-80s, early 90s, we've stayed there. So there's no wrong answers, because suicide's a complicated issue. But in your lifetime, can y'all think mid-80s, early 90s, if any of y'all are old enough to remember those times with me? But could you think of something that happened that might have caused that shift? What was going on in our country? And there's several things. Suicide, like I said, is complicated.
Anybody can think of it?
Housing, absolutely. How much of your mental health is struggles when you got financing problems? And,
Right.
and what about when you're struggling with your housing? So housing, absolutely. What about drugs? What about one thing economists attribute that to is I don't know about y'all, but I'm from a small county, Bibb County. So when we lost our textile mills, it was devastating because we lost those jobs and they never returned. So many factors, AIDS epidemic, many things were factors. But just like you to think about it, Alabamians are at a greater risk. So what are some things? Then when we look at suicide versus homicide, when y'all get on the news and on your phone at night, you see the homicides, don't you? Well, we give you this graph just to let you know that suicides outrank homicide every day, year after year. But we don't talk about it. Now we want to talk about it responsibly.
Right.
When we talk about it, we don't want a contagion. We don't want a fear there. But we want you to know how often it's happening. And I'll ask you one question on this. Suicide, actually, they believe it's underreported by 20%. So why would a death not be reported as suicide? Why would a family look at a coroner and say, hey, please don't rule this as suicide? Insurance. Yeah. What if my insurance don't pay? I can't bury my loved one. I can't pay off my house. I don't have his income now. What else would be a factor? Denial. Yeah. I'm not sure. You know, what about an overdose where it's not sure or there's no note? What about what will my community think of me? So yeah.
Either they stop breathing or their heart stops,
Mm-hmm.
but it could have been secondary to an overdose.
Right.
Mhm.
But what would be on the death certificate
Mhm.
is cardiac arrest or pulmonary, like all of that stops. So I think because there's no way for
Mhm.
unless you do the autopsy and all of that, and sometimes they don't do autopsy.
Right. And sometimes the family doesn't want someone to know. The only dilemma with that is what about when that family member has relatives that are struggling and they think they're the first to struggle? So sometimes, even in a tragedy, we can support each other and say, hey, you know, be aware.
Okay, so like she mentioned earlier, of course, we as being are at a higher risk. Okay, these are a few higher risk groups. We'll kind of go through real quickly with time. You have to think about, of course, men being at the top. Okay, it says women attempt suicide at 4 times more often. Why do you think that is so with women? Anybody have an idea? Hmm. Right, more hostile. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
allow time for intervention.
Yeah, and then of course you have middle age groups. Um, I don't know. Well, of course, LGBTQ community. You know, you have sexual assault groups. Look at the one at the the third to the bottom. First responders. How could that be a particular high risk group? Yeah. Yes. You know, you have people that's if you're in the forefront of dealing with someone else's trauma and you got to come home and you're not able to desensitize your own, you know, what you've seen throughout the day in and day out, it does put a person at greater risk. Okay. And then, of course, other ailments as far as active addiction, disaster survivors, you know, think about folks in like Louisiana who had to commute to Alabama. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and with that, I just like to say you can't look at someone and determine whether they're in crisis. Check on your overachievers, your valedictorians, your star athlete. I know when we lost Twitch last year, it's been almost a year now. You know, how many people could look at him and his videos and not see somebody that was talented and struggling? But there's a lot of pressure when you're on top. And then I like to add on that last line, anyone with a serious physical health or mental health diagnosis. But how many people do y'all know that struggle that don't have a diagnosis? So I just add that because like I said, the first person in your family, the first person in my family that went to rehab for alcoholism, somebody actually said in my family, well, she's the first alcoholic.
Wow.
Now, do y'all think she was the first alcoholic? She was the first one to seek treatment. So when our youth go and get those diagnoses, start thinking back and saying, I don't say, oh, you don't have that. Nobody in our family's ever had it. Start thinking about what grandma dealt with and things like that and open up this conversation. Just because we didn't name it doesn't mean we haven't struggled with it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So you got firearms and suicide. All right. So as you see on the diagram, you have firearms does make 51% of people using that method as a way to take their life. Suffocation, does that?
Mhm.
Okay, 28%. poisoning, 13%, and other. What do you think falls under the other category with that 8%? Yeah, what you believe? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that would probably include hanging because I think on the two slides they one says suffocation, one says hanging. But I like to tell y'all the reason we talk about means, like we wouldn't want to talk about this on the news, but we're talking about it in a training where we talk about it responsibly. But the reason we talk about it's for intervention.
Okay.
So if y'all had to guess, if it's 51% for the U.S., what do you think that number would be for Alabama? So you're thinking it would be lower? For firearms?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, that's why we ask. I always like to think what do y'all think about, where Alabamians would be in this?
Mhm.
Is it more for Alabama because of the law with firearms?
That's what we're
Here
going
we
to
go.
show you. Yeah.
Alabama, 68%.
So I think that's one of the reasons why we went above the national average and we stayed there. We're firearm owners.
Yeah.
And so if I showed y'all Alabama veterans, it would be 80 to 83%. So the reason we bring it up, it's not a right to bear arms conversation. I tell people this isn't political. Corey and I are here to love you regardless of anything, religion, anything. But I just bring it up and I put this on the table to remind myself to tell y'all. And tell your family members that you can go to your local VA and they'll give you a free gun lock for every gun you own. It don't matter if you own 3 or 17. And so like my dad, he would have probably said, well, I've been raised my whole life around guns. I handle them responsibly. But what if you said, Dad, how many children and grandchildren you have in and out of that house? So what we mean by a gun lock is just let's create some distance. If someone's in crisis, just say, hey, I love you. I want to keep you safe. Let's get the firearm out of the nightstand. Let's get out of the under the seat of the car. We have these for protection, but we're more likely to harm ourselves in crisis. So it's just having the conversation. And the conversation, I want to tell you, can be uncomfortable, but it saves lives.
And also here are some resources that you guys can use in regards to the firearm safety. Of course, anyone receiving counseling with a serious mental illness who may be on the verge of a crisis or a breakdown should always, far as like with myself, and I need to start incorporating that. Speaking to people who may have a firearm in the home, being more proactive about that, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with very vulnerable people, and I have to be mindful of that. So I'm gonna start putting that. I keep forgetting
into your everyday speech. Well, that's what I tell you, and the reason why is because, like, think about it like this: that the female in my family, when people say, well, do you have to ask a female? I know she doesn't own any guns. Well, you do, because when they're in crisis, when I asked my family member, I said, hey, do you have access to firearms? And she said, well, yeah, right there. My husband's got 3 shotguns in the closet. So what I'm telling you this for is not to scare you. Corey and I are not telling you to go to somebody's house and confiscate their weapons. We're telling you to think about it like, hey, I love you. I want to keep you safe. And help me help you. And who do you trust? So in that case, she said, well, I'll give them to my mom. And so that's not me and Corey. Do you see where in the past with mental health, we took people's rights away? This is allowing them to still be in control. So this is them saying, hey, my brother can keep them till I'm in a better place, or I can put gun locks on them, or I'm going to put a gun lock on them and I'm going to give you the key to the gun lock. And then when I feel better, I'll come back and get it from you. But that is allowing them to stay in charge.
Okay. All right. LGBTQ community and suicide. Of course, you have it where the particular group of LGBTQ, they're having to always deal with the idea of being accepted. And so clearly when you see on the diagram, you have the ones that the reason why they are at a greater risk, because you have one accepting adult where 40% was less likely to report suicide attempt in the past year. All right. So as you see on the diagram, they are at a greater risk with 27.3%. Especially if you have someone who's been battling with their sexual identity and come from a family that is not accepting of change. And so that idea alone could just haunt them day in and day out.
Yeah.
So
And the reason we include that slide is like that on the far left. How many of y'all would talk to a youth if you knew you could cut that risk by 40%? I believe everybody in the room would go talk to that student, that child or youth, and just say. So think about it when this subject comes up. If you've got someone that confided in you, whether it's their sexual identity, what about their racial identity, any box they put themselves in. What if I'm the only person adopted? I'm the only person that's not went to college, or I'm the first person to go to college. Every situation has a box and a set of pressures. What if you could be that one person by cutting it in half? So if you hear language where somebody says, I don't belong, I'm different, I'm not like everybody else, I don't handle things the way everybody else does, they're putting themselves in that box. So that's why we want to share that with you.
Okay. All right. Theories of suicide. You go ahead.
Okay. So we found that when we did this training that it's one thing to talk about suicide, but we always say, well, they're sad or they're depressed. But Joyner lost his father and he studied. He said, why would somebody act on it? So, you can think about it. You might think about it for decades but he's found that when someone was in crisis and likely to attempt, they had three things in common, or three factors. Isolation, so feeling alone, feeling different, feeling like a burden. And that might be financially. That might be I'm going to lose my house, or I've lost my job. Or how about all of a sudden I've had a stroke and somebody's got to take care of me now. So it could be physical, financial, and then capability to kill oneself. I always think about like that could be your veteran. That could be someone that's experienced sexual assault, trauma. But those three things, if you know that someone has experienced those things, it's time to say, how are you doing? I want to check in on you. I know you've had a tough time since this happened. How are you doing? I care about you. And see how on the bottom corner, step one's the idea develops, then it gets stronger, and then it is when they start thinking about how they're going to attempt. So that's why we want to be there right when they start thinking about it.
Anyone have any questions so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my question is, have you dealt with people that truly desire to commit suicide,
Mm-hmm.
that they would open up and really let me know, I want to commit suicide?
Mm-hmm.
Or do they mostly seem to hide
It
what
go.
they really intend to do?
It goes both ways. I've experienced both. I spoke to someone today at work, and I was able to listen, but also I was able to be firm by saying, "Hey, I need you to be honest about these thoughts that you're having." And when I was talking to that person, they kind of broke down. They was just like, "I got to be real with you." I was like, "Yeah." I mean, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with vulnerable people. And so it does go both ways. You'll have some people who would just mask it, where they don't want people to know their truth. And then you'll have some who are just, reacting off his or her impulses and their emotions because they're dealing with a lot, and so, but really with the idea of having, knowing, or may not knowing if this person has a mental health diagnosis or whatnot, being able to just actively listen and getting them the necessary help they need. Like I said, even in the beginning, when I mentioned, you don't have to be a therapist, but yet you can still just be an active listener for that person. Yes, ma'am.
My next question will be,
Got it. Well, it's for the people online too.
my next question would be then, in regards to people that want to commit suicide or whatever, do they all have a mental illness diagnosis, or?
Well, some people can have a catastrophic situation. Somebody might not have ever considered it, but then, how about if you lost a child? How about if, so we're going to talk about some things that might make someone in crisis. So some of it can be, hey, I've just struggled personally. And then some of it can be, I've never considered it, but now this has happened in my life and everything's changed.
Yeah.
So yeah, like with what this is one reason. So we talked about how often it's happening, why it's happening. Why do people not reach out for help? And there's two things when we talk about suicide and mental health, don't y'all always hear about bullying? But I like to let you think that there's a felt stigma. A lot of times somebody in crisis is bullying themselves. You know, what if the biggest bully they face is them, and they're saying, you know, I'm not talented at like you. I'm not, you know, how think about how we compare ourselves to our siblings and our other family members. And then there's an enacted stigma, and that's where when that person who's already struggling gets out at work, at school, even in our faith, sometimes we can mean well, but we can harm people. So many people, we did a study, one of our former board members works at the University of Alabama, and he did a study, and he found that many people would rather tell their employer that they're in jail than tell them that they're being treated for mental health. So think about, that's how strong stigma is that I would rather call my boss and lie and say, hey, I've been arrested, I can't come in till Friday, than say, hey, I took a handful of pills trying to end my life and I've been admitted to the hospital and I don't get released until then. But yeah, because they think about it, you know, well, I'll lose my license, I'll lose my right to have a firearm, or they'll never promote me if they think I have a mental problem. So that's why it's important. So Corey and I work with a lady, and her story, she shared was that 18 years ago, she had made an attempt to end her life, and she was in ICU 3 days. She said, I was very sick, and when I got out, I could look at the coffee table and I could not think coffee table. She said, I went back to work, and I worked with people for years and I couldn't say their name. I was very sick. She said, meanwhile, her church sent her a message and said, don't come back. They just said, you'd have went to hell if you'd have died, and we don't want you here influencing people. And she said, I was devastated. So I'll tell you, she now shares, hey, I've got a new faith family and they love me. They know all my issues. But she said one thing at a training one time, it stood out to me. She said, in 49 years of struggling with my mental health, where's my casserole? So ASPARC started a mental health awareness campaign, and y'all can join this. Y'all can be part of it. But think about it. Do we show up with comfort food and reach out to people when they have a physical crisis or they have a baby or a funeral? But what do we do then when they have a mental crisis? Often the times we disappear. So that's why that dish is empty, just to make you aware. And so if you want to participate in that with us, all you have to do is take a picture with the empty dish. And it's just sending that message, and it's allowing you to talk to people and saying, hey, are you aware? You know, the next time somebody struggles, say, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can I meet you? Or can I, you know, just send a text? How are you doing? I hadn't checked. You were in my mind, my heart. I wanted to check on you. So what are some ways that y'all feel that we could address that stigma?
Anybody?
Maintaining a safe environment where people feel like they can open up. And sometimes it is difficult for different people. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's fine. Go ahead.
But I will say, just keeping a safe environment where people can be open, honest, transparent. Sure. If you're going through, hey, I'm going through today. You know, today I don't feel blessed and highly favored. Today I feel low. Mm-hmm. You know, just being able to be real about it. But it is a two-way street, right? It's the person that has to be real, and then it's the person that knows how to handle that realness.
I'm glad you shared that, because sometimes the way we get people comfortable with us is by sharing our own vulnerability. But you know that you might not look at Corey and me and think we had ever struggled. So sometimes it takes the courage, and like our colleague Christy showing that, because when we show up on events like tonight, you don't see the problems, you don't see the calamity and things that's went on in our life. So creating a safe, trusted space to someone and saying you can always talk to me. So y'all kind of handled that, but we want to have laws so we don't discriminate, and then we want people to know that struggling with your mental health is understandable. And then we added this slide from our trainings, from feedback from people like y'all that say, hey, I've lost a loved one. When y'all do trainings, we all tell people this.
Yeah, so of course, when you're dealing with individuals who've contemplated, you know, suicide, you have to be very sensitive and mindful of your words and what you say. So of course, in here it has, instead of saying died by suicide, or by suicide versus, instead of saying committed suicide, using the terms died by suicide. Because when you think of the word committed, what tends to come to mind? What do y'all think? Yeah.
Yeah. Or commit a crime, commit a sin,
So it'll put someone feeling like they're in a box.
And I heard one person, and we also said, like, committed to a facility, in the past where there's the fear there. We had one person at a training recently. I don't know if you were, but they said, if you use the word commit, are you committed to it? To where, like, if they failed, do they have to reattempt? So that goes into the next one. You don't want somebody that lives to think, well, I failed at that. I need to attempt again. So loved ones have asked us to say, don't say that if my loved one lived that they failed an attempt, or if they died that they were successful. So think about it. Say survived an attempt or completed an attempt.
Especially said, avoid saying that a person who dies from suicide was selfish. Okay. Because clearly that's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
And then one thing that one of our colleagues, Jaquan Winters, lost his 11-year-old sister to suicide. And he was 19 at the time. So he was a young man himself. He said the first 2.5 years that he went in Walmart, he went in Dollar General, when he'd see somebody, they'd say, hey, how'd she do it? Are you sure she meant to do it? And they put him on trial. And so you might not have seen somebody in 6 months, but ask them, how old would Christian be now? Tell me about her. What do you miss? Don't let her death define her life. He said for 2.5 years, he struggled himself because it felt like nobody's mourning my sister. They just have that curiosity. So think about it. Say their name, ask about them. And then, of course, with a faith setting, don't say it's sinful, you're not praying hard enough, your faith is weak, or you're going to hell. Reach out to them with the love that you would want extended to your close relatives and loved ones.
Okay. Do we need to go through this, or?
Well, this is just wrapping it up on the first introductory slides, but so you always want to work to increase protective factors. Family connection, having a confidant, engagement, and then our faith. And the way that I say approach our faith, since we're in a faith setting, is say, hey, you've told me you're struggling. How does your faith play into it? And you might have someone say, hey, the only reason I haven't ended my life is my faith. And then it's a protective factor. But what if someone says, I went to church with you for years, but I quit going because this person hurt my feelings. This person said this to me after this situation. So allow them to share with you. Don't assume. Someone can be right there beside you, and they can believe differently or have had a different set of pain or shame. So I always say, the other thing is somebody can have every bit of this and be in crisis. So check on someone, check on your pastors, check on people that you feel like have it all together.
Okay.
Yeah, so we got this far to get to the main.
So this is the reason why we're here.
Yeah. So how are y'all feeling? We've talked about some tough
stuff. Is that a
stuff.
lot of information, right?
Okay. Well, we felt like if we just did this, you don't know the importance of using it. So, like CPR, if you know how to use CPR, but you don't know when to use it. So now QPR is really simple. Question, persuade, refer. So think about it. We're going to ask somebody, we're going to listen to them, and hey, we're going to get you some help.
It's not intended for counseling or treatment. Remember that. We ain't trying to do no therapy. We just trying to save a life. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So that was a relief to me because, like I said, I worked at a car dealership. I thought, but I also used that to let myself off the hook. I'd say, oh, I'm not like Corey, so I don't have to help them. How many people are going to get to Corey if we don't help them?
And there are so many times I don't feel like I'm qualified.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying. All right.
You're humble.
All right. So we got a couple of myths. It says no one can stop a suicide. It is inevitable. Okay. However, the fact of the matter says if a person in crisis get the help they need, they may never be suicidal again. Okay. We'll just kind of go through a few of them to get to the. Ma'am, I'm sorry.
Can I address that? Because I went through
suicidal prevention years ago in Huntsville to be on the crisis line. And we had a psychologist tell us that when a person get to that point that they really want to commit suicide, that there are no amount words that you could say to them to keep them from committing suicide.
And I think that's a great point, because I think that's what we're going to encourage you to do, is try not to talk them out of it. Try to listen to them. And I'm sure that's what part of your training was. But yeah, and that was a relief to me, because I put my mom hat on in these situations and I want to solve problems. And when we talk to people who have survived, they'll say, think about it. Like I've learned with my own daughter, when I start going, hey, you could get another job. Hey, you could take a different class. That's when she goes, you're not listening. And so that's when the door goes up, the window gets shut. So that, yeah, I'm glad you said that, but I do like to say, with that myth, it's the help they need. So that's part of us listening to them. And how can I help you? What help do you need?
Okay. Another myth: only experts can prevent suicide. However, suicide prevention is everyone's business. Anyone can help prevent tragedy of suicide. Okay. We'll just kind of go through one more.
Yeah.
Once a person decides to complete suicide, there's nothing anyone can do to stop them. However, suicide is the most preventable kind of death. Almost in any positive action may be save a life. I heard the same thing at work. I heard a nurse say, once they made up in their mind, there ain't nothing else you can say. I just sat there with a smile on my face because I didn't want to go back and forth with another adult about that response. But I know, for me, I try my best to just, listen in all seriousness, because that's one thing that I did. I say I soaked up big time when I went through counseling classes, is active listening, because there could be certain words or certain things that a person could say to you that you can kind of like, oh, okay, you're dealing with this, and not using it against them, but also helping them. Like today, the person that I spoke with, they were expecting for me to give them, I guess, answers to their problem. And I just had to look at them and was like, you can work through this dilemma that you're experiencing, but I'm not in a position to give you answers, because what's going to happen is they're going to totally depend on me to solve every problem that comes up. And that's what makes it kind of difficult too. So.
I was wondering, I just saw the clock. We
Yeah.
got a certain time we're supposed to be finished?
Well, we started at 6:15.
Okay.
I don't know how many more.
Okay, I didn't know. Okay, but one of the biggest things on the myths, though, that I want y'all to think about in your life, where what people use myths for is to say, I can't help them, and like I said, they let themselves off the hook. But I can tell you, I did a training where everybody in the room had attempted, and I panicked. I said, what am I going to teach y'all? And I said, well, let me pull up the PowerPoint. And I said, I tell people every day to ask you if you're thinking about suicide, and they're scared to ask you because they think you're going to get mad at them. And a lady in the back said, no, if I'm hurting, it lets me know you saw I was hurting and you cared about me. So that's always motivated me before, where I was scared to ask. Now I think about a time in your life when you've been hurting and nobody picked up on it. Don't it make you hurt more? So what if you've been thinking about suicide and nobody asked, nobody cares? You just think, nobody cares about you.
And also, let me add too, because of course, I work at a hospital, so I just kind of stepped out on faith one day, and I decided to do a group on suicide. And I felt like it went okay. The next day, my supervisor came to me and was like, "Hey, I want to thank you so much for what you did." I was like, "What happened?" You had so much great feedback from the ladies that you did group with on suicide. They was just like, thank you so much. And when I did the group, one particular woman was like, I didn't know we could talk about this in a hospital. I'm like, well, that's what we're here for. These are some of the reasons that got us placed in this hospital.
And Corey and I did a training in Montgomery at a church. And a lady said she was 12 years old when she lost her mom to suicide. And she said it's been 37 years. So she's 49 now. And she said, it is so nice to be in a space where I can talk about it. I've been ashamed. She said, even though I was 12 I always think, what did I miss with my mom? And I know I shouldn't blame myself. So having a safe space to talk about these tough things, you can help somebody.
All right, so we have clues and warning signs. Anyone have any questions so far?
So the class that you had with all the people that had attempted suicide, what were some other things that they said that they wish people would have done?
Well, that main thing is that they wanted you to ask, and then they wanted you to listen, and we're gonna go over some ways to talk about it with them. But yes, it was a beautiful thing. It taught me so much. I was so intimidated, but think about it. If they're thinking about it, they've thought about it a lot, and nobody's talking about with them. So it's given them an opportunity. Sometimes somebody answers your question based on what they think you want to hear, and you be like Corey's group, being the first person to say, I can admit I'm feeling this way, and not be in trouble or not being punished. Because we find that when we're in schools, students and young people are not admitting it because they think they're going to be in trouble. So this is the thing is, yeah, please ask, and then please listen.
Okay. All right. Take all signs seriously when it comes to cues and warning signs. The more cues and signs observed, the greater the risk. Okay. All right. So we have a couple of cues. Well, warning signs. We have direct verbal cues, indirect verbal, behavioral, and situational.
So yeah, this is where there's different things that make someone, and then there's different ways they react to it. Everyone's not going to react the same.
Okay. So verbal cues when it comes to suicide, I've decided to kill myself, like someone, directly coming out and admitting that this is what they decided to do. I wish that I were dead. I'm going to commit suicide. Okay.
What about a such and such? What would y'all expect somebody to put in those parentheses? If this happens, I'm going to kill myself. Or if this doesn't happen, what would you think a such and such would be? If he breaks up with me, if I lose my job. So that's probably going to be more likely what you're going to hear is a such and such. And that such and such is going to change depending on that person.
Okay. So of course you have indirect. Those are the ones where you really have to pay attention. I'm tired of my life and I can't go on. My family would be better off without me. Who cares if I died anyway? Okay.
One of our colleagues said her son will say, well, pretty soon you're going to look around, I'm not going to be here. So those are the things that we would normally skip, but that's where a time you pull them aside and say, I heard what you said. I want to talk to you about it. And I'll give you 3 simple words. And you use your own simple words. But what if somebody says, I just want out? And you said, tell me more. Or I won't be around much longer. I'm listening. Pretty soon you won't have to worry about me. I hear you. And you see what I'm doing there? I'm just saying something that asks them to keep talking.
If you want to go over that.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't say anything, but all of a sudden somebody is buying a gun that never cared about a gun, or they're stockpiling pills. What about if they say, I want a will, I want you to have this if something happens to me, but they're a young person and in good health? What about if they give you that, say, hey, you can have my iPhone, you can have my Xbox.
Yeah.
What if they're asking questions? Would I go to hell? Would you come to my funeral? I want this song at my funeral. Drug or alcohol abuse, especially if they've been in recovery and then relapsed. And then how about unexplained anger, aggression, irritability? Sometimes we'll hear after the fact, well, this student got in a fight the week before. And that was so out of character for them. So I like to say, when it comes to behaviors, don't look at this list. And trust your gut. And if you see somebody do anything that's out of the ordinary for them, it's a good time to talk to them. And one guy even told us, he said, will you tell people if they get happy all of a sudden after a time of struggling? He says, my dad got really, really happy when he made up his mind. So if somebody acts different, good or bad, just say, hey, I wanted to check in with you. How are you doing?
All right. You got situational cues. Being fired or expelled from school, a recent unwanted move, loss of a major relationship. I mean, so it could be a very just an unexpected, unpredictable thing. Okay. Think about just what tends to happen day to day, far as it's on the news. You have someone who was murdered or what have you, and then so in their mind, hey, how can I deal with this loss? Okay.
So yeah, sometimes think about this. How does a veteran feel when they watch the news and they see something just in the news about overseas and all that? Some things can trigger us. So sometimes it doesn't have to be happening to us, but it can remind us of things we've already experienced.
Oh, well. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right.
Suicide question.
Yeah. So the big thing that we want you to remember is, if in doubt, don't wait, just ask. Don't do like, oh, I'll ask them later. Be persistent. Talk to them alone in a private setting. I always joke and say, this isn't a Thanksgiving conversation. We all have that aunt that's going to get you over the potato salad and say, how you doing since you divorced? Don't put somebody on the spot. Pull them aside and say, that's the time to ask them by yourself. Say, I know you just went through a tough time. How are you doing? Give yourself time, and then have yourself resources. And so I can get all of your emails and send you a copy of this and some resources.
How to ask the question is less important than you asking
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So you may think I'm asking it wrong, but the important thing is that somebody knows you care. Well, the QPR Institute, they say there's 3 ways. There's a direct way to ask, an indirect, and then there's a way not to ask. With ASPARC, we tell you the less direct, just use that to build on it. If you're uncomfortable asking, say, have you been very unhappy lately? I know what you've been through lately. How are you doing? But we encourage you to be direct. And the reason why is, if they can sense that we're uncomfortable asking, what if they just say no because they don't want to worry us? So we encourage you to try to think about your tone, your facial expressions, and work up to just saying, are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? And they'll even tell us suicide, the word has so much stigma. They'll say with a young person, but some people want to say harming, but then you could get more questions than answers. So try to be direct and look at them in a way that you say it, and so you can say, yes, I am. And I had a friend, I'll always tell you, if you ask it, pause, because I had a friend that said, I'm thinking some bad thoughts. I'm ashamed. And she knows I do this. So I said, well, are you thinking about suicide? And she said, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. And years ago, I would have said, oh, good, I'm glad. But this time I just sat there, and then she said, but what if I am? So sometimes they're looking at you going, can I trust you? Can I be honest with you? So sometimes don't run, don't jump and be happy. Allow them to look at you and go, I have been thinking about it.
Okay. You can't ask the question, find someone who can. Okay. So it's how not to ask the suicide question. You're not thinking about killing yourself, are you? How would you do? You wouldn't do anything stupid, would you? And so you hear kind of how sarcastic that is, really just throwing it up in someone's face. Suicide is a dumb idea. Surely you're not thinking about suicide. Okay. So those are some examples of some wrong ways to how to present that to someone.
And then I'll even tell y'all from a faith standpoint, you want to say, you'll go to hell. You want to discourage them. And sometimes we have well-meaning intent with that. But then sometimes when we say things like that, they won't talk to us again. So I would just always, again, say, ask where they can answer yes instead of being scared to talk to you. So you've asked the big scary question. You've said, are you thinking of killing yourself? And then they say, yes, I am. What do you do then? I always joked and said P stood for panic, but it actually stands for persuade.
Yeah. So, of course, it's listening to the problem, giving them your full undivided attention. Remember, suicide is not the problem, only the solution to a perceived insoluble problem. It's kind of like, I'll just reference my bishop. At the end of the day, you don't condemn the person, you just acknowledge what the problem is. Okay.
Yeah. And like you said, when people come to you, you don't start giving them advice.
No.
You just say, wow, that's another tell me more moment. And I'll say, thank you for trusting me. Thank you
Right.
for sharing that with me, because they're sitting there holding their breath going, what do you think about me? Do you think I'm crazy now? Do you, they're scared. So all you got to do, persuade could just be L. It could be listen.
Of course, it says when you go, well, so then ask, it says when you go with them to get help. Um, this is where, if you don't feel comfortable, well, in the midst of listening, getting them to the necessary person, the professional who can actually continue the work of doing the suicide prevention, letting them be able to process that information that they've been bottling up for over time. Okay. So that goes back, like I said, referring. It says suicide people often believe that they can't be helped, so you may have to do more. Okay. All right.
Yeah, the best referral is saying, hey, every situation is gonna be different. They may say, I have a therapist, and you say, well, let's call them. When's the last time you saw them? Or did you get that appointment with your nurse practitioner? Or can we call, or can we go to JBS? I was very excited today in Tuscaloosa. They opened up a mental health emergency room. It's called Hope Point. And when you go in, you sit in the recliner and you talk to a peer support specialist, so you don't feel judged. You're talking to someone who's in recovery, and they're helpful. And we have a similar facility here in this area at JBS. It's Jefferson Blunt St. Clair. So letting people know that these areas exist. And it's, so think about it with a physical health emergency room. If I broke my leg, I would go to the emergency room and they would see me and stabilize me, and then I'd follow up with an orthopedic surgeon. A mental health emergency is the same way. Sometimes they might need me to sober up. They might need me to calm down, might need to give me a quiet room. And then the idea is to be released within 23 hours, because most people do not want to commit to anything over a day. And then see, that's allowing them to stay in control. They can leave anytime. But when we get you stable and released, then you can follow up with therapist or social worker or whatever your team is. So anytime they're willing to get help, that's a good outcome. Since almost all efforts, just remember, most of the time, think about that lady. She was saying, oh, it lets me know you saw my pain, you cared about me. So think about that and don't be scared to ask. So here's the beautiful part. So you've said the big scary question, are you thinking about suicide? And then you've said the easy, tell me more. But then how about this? This is beautiful. I want you to live. I'm on your side. We'll get through this. I love you. I'll care about you, and in this setting, can I pray with you? Can I pray for you? Thank you for trusting me. Get others involved. And that's where you form a team. We don't want you to go out of here and be the 988 lifeline for them. You want to have a team available, so that, like Corey said, you're not there to solve the problems. You're just there to say, I love you. I care about you. I want to keep you safe.
All right.
And then join that team.
Join the team. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
That's why I commend that.
Yeah. And Corey's part of that team. See, Corey would be a different role. I would be getting two people to Corey.
Right.
But how do we get somebody to Corey if we don't know they're struggling?
Right.
And then one big thing right here, if QPR had a fourth letter, it should be F for follow up. So anytime you have a conversation like this with somebody, check on them. Don't, hey, what time are you going to bed tonight? We talked about something tough Tuesday at 7. Can I check on you at 9? Can I meet you for coffee in the morning? And what does that do? That reassures them that I haven't scared you away and I want to talk to you again.
Yeah, exactly. So remember, it says apply for QPR. You plant the seed of hope. Okay. And of course, no judgmental space. Collaborating concern with a friend, and concerned friend, resisting the urge to offer unsolicited advice or giving a pep talk. Do show empathy and validate their feelings, and tell me more.
So, think about it. If your teenager comes in and they're in a bad place, my son went to bed for 3 days, and I said, gosh, he must be staying up late on his phone. And his brother come to me and said, Mom, his girlfriend's broke up with him 3 days ago. So so practice, tell me more, and don't give advice, just listen. But in my mind, I would have said, your heart's going to get broke many times. You need to get over that, girl. What you got to reframe your language and say, oh, that's tough. Tell me about it. Keeping the conversation open.
Okay. So of course the question, are you thinking of killing yourself? All right. So we're going to practice this real quick. We almost done.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. The question is, can we say it together? Are you thinking of
Are you
killing
thinking
yourself?
of killing yourself?
Okay. Then next you say, tell me
Tell
more.
me more.
And then, hey, I want you to live. And we can get through this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then say, I love you. Thank you for sharing with me. Thank you for trusting me. I've had a veteran say, I'm so ashamed of what I did. I've told you something I never told my wife. And I said, well, that's because you're protecting her, but thank you for trusting me with
Right.
it. And then one more, how are you doing since we talked? Follow up.
Okay.
So there's that big question. Are y'all more comfortable now than when we started? You feel like if you had someone that you were concerned about, you're more comfortable than when we began? We always begin and end with resources.
Y'all need that information.
Mhm.
Now, if anybody wanted the slides.
Yeah, if y'all will, I'll show you. Go one. Let me see. There's one. This is the different survey link. I'll have to send it to you. But if y'all can give me your email, I can mail you a copy of the PowerPoint. I can give you a certificate and some summary documents and some phone numbers that you can put in your phone. I also give you a link to this video because this is what QPR looks like in real life. Kevin Briggs was an officer on the Golden Gate Bridge. He come into contact with many people on the verge of ending their life, and he met Kevin Berthea. And the beautiful part about that is you see them there returning to that bridge 10 years later. And we want that person in your life to have that 10 years. And the beautiful thing on that video, it's just 14 minutes. So if y'all have time, you can watch it at home. But one thing that stood out to me is I was so scared of what do I say the first time I come across somebody. And he said, hi, my name is Kevin. What's your name? And, they're standing there in that critical moment. And then when he climbed back over, he said, what did I say that made you give life another chance? And he said, you let me speak. You listened to me. So think about that. He didn't say you gave me advice. You got me a job. So think about that. He said, you let me speak. So that's how you can contact us. If y'all have a group of coworkers, a club, anything like that, we like bringing this training to you. And let's see. So how can you help us? If I send you that email, there's a little survey. If you can fill that out, that's how we bring this training to you at no charge. You can host a training. Everybody knows somebody we don't know. You can follow us on social media. You can join our team. You can be a part of us. So we thank you so much for giving us your attention. And if we can help you in any way, just let us know.
Anybody have any? Yes, ma'am.
It depends. We have different roles. Like I always tell people, like when I talk to them is, what are your strengths? And some people are good at calling people and telling them about QPR and setting up a training. Some people are good at social media. Everybody's got a different strength. And so I always ask them what they would like to do with us. And like Corey, he took the course and he trains with us now. So everybody has a different role. But I mean, I've had moms that say, I could never get up and speak publicly, but I will come put stickers on books or I will fold pamphlets, so there's different needs depending on, what someone wants to do with us. But yes, being a part of our team is really helpful.
Any other questions? That's good. We ended in an hour. I love that.
Yeah. Did it surprise you? I like to know when you come into this training, to me, like you have one set of feelings about what you think it's going to be about. And I think it's always surprising about how you feel afterwards. I mean, are you more comfortable with it than you thought you'd be? I'll tell you one thing that Christy that works with us, she gives great examples, but we, at that same training you and I were at, that young lady said, I don't know why my mom couldn't see me when she did that. And Christy says, when I'm in crisis, a fog lowers. and all of y'all might be right there that close to me, but I can't see you. She said, when the fog lifts, I'm so ashamed. And I'll go, gosh, I have all these people that love me. So if y'all have somebody that's struggling, just remember that that fog may be lowered, and don't take it personal, and just, just love on them and get them through it.
Yeah. Anybody got any other questions? No? No questions? Yes, ma'am.
Tips do you have for varying age groups from like 7, 8, kindergarten age? Because we do have kindergartners that, do show suicidal ideations up until teenagers to where they feel that they can speak to someone in a trusted manner, but not that they're kind of like you said earlier, that they're going to be in trouble. What are some tips in spiritual leadership that you would recommend we utilize?
Now, I've always heard like meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Like
I would just say, like, of course, meeting where they are, but then if it be where getting on that level, having that conversation of, hey, could you tell me, what are you thinking about? Because you have to think about far as someone from the age of 5, 6 who they probably gotten the idea from a teenager, like a brother or sister, and then they can't really articulate that that's something they really, far as engaging in a suicidal act. However, they probably are playing with it, like if it be having a pencil and acting like they're trying to stab themselves or something. But yet, getting on that level just to get an idea to say, well, hey, where you learn that from? What is that about? To allow them to open up more. But still meeting them where they are, because you got to think about, they're still not as mature to go in details unless they've had that idea played in their head like a recording.
And y'all mentioned that Belinda had come and spoke to you previously. One thing that she said, we'll sometimes dismiss somebody young like that and say they're seeking attention, but think about it. They're kind of seeking support and they're seeking connection. So, just say, if you feel like that, you can always talk to me, knowing who you would, and I tell people too, there's a difference between the act and the thought. And sometimes you can think about it, but you're not going to act on it. But we just need to find out that that's the case.
Yeah. Okay. Any other? That's a good question.
Huh? Especially with young people. And I always try to tell young people that's tough. I was raised to where we said, "Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet. But your problems are only going to get bigger." But does that make them? I mean, how do you look forward to life? But and then remember too, they experience things we never even thought about. So I always try to say that's tough. Tell me. And Judith that works with us says, help me help you. Tell me, I probably don't understand what you're seeing on social media. Tell me about it.
Yeah. Social media is a big factor nowadays. I mean, but also to add to that, when it comes to like small children, of course they might be in a big group, but removing that audience away to really get on that child's level so you can get an understanding of where certain behaviors are coming from, because it might be just unintentional. It might be like you said, it might seem something on social media, they thought it was funny, but then at the end of the day, when an adult approached them in a serious manner, hey, it's to educate, to say these are inappropriate behaviors, we don't do this. And then if you want to take it a step further, let them know, hey, I trust in you to not continue these behaviors. But then if you feel like it's still more of a concern, then come to their parent about it.
How do you suggest proceeding if that parent isn't receptive to your observation?
You have to gauge that for yourself on that one.
We get that a lot with schools.
Yeah.
The counselors, the teachers know the child is struggling, and there's not so much support at home. So that's a tough one. But just trying to know. But I'll tell you this: don't ever underestimate your role, because we had a slide at the beginning that says one person can decrease that risk by 40%. And I've had one of our teammates says that his 4th grade teacher was the only thing that kept him alive. So school, even though he didn't see them, and holidays, weekends, breaks. That's that one person. Just knowing that he could always go to that one person. So don't ever underestimate your role with somebody.
Okay. All right.
Y'all been a great group. Thank you.
Any other questions? My bishop just walked in. He back there chilling.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate y'all giving us this opportunity.
All right, guys. Well, listen, it's been real.
But if y'all want to take a picture with us, you can, because sometimes on social media, we reach more people that way. Somebody says, hey, or hey, you could come to my church, or, things like that.
Okay. All right. We are done.
Thank you.
I'm thinking that QR is expired. We can try, but I was thinking
I was gonna say that we need to get like a piece of paper
yeah, if
to
you can
get
do
like
that, I can
everyone's
send
email.
Mhm.
If you guys.
And we don't do anything with your email. Oh, yeah. If y'all want to do it, if you'll send it to
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
You'll get it to me, and we're gonna start on our social media about where's my cash hole link, and share a picture of somebody every week.
Alan, you gotta catch it.
And let people see.
I don't know if you want to try to scan that. To
Oh, yeah,
see
see,
if it'll work.
one of them was expired. I hope that's not. Did it go to a thing that says UAB? That's not it. What it's going, that's I'll have to update them. I have to send you an updated one for it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can just.
I guess the easiest way is if I could get everybody to write their email down, I'll send you a link here. Okay.
Okay. I just need to get
And
a.
look, we've got some magnets. We've got some
Matter of fact, let me see
stickers.
this right here.
If y'all want to get, okay.
Yeah, on the email.
Oh,